The camera lights flooded the pristine studio with an almost blinding clarity. Everything looked perfect. The polished floor reflected the soft glow of the LED panels, the audience seats were full, the host smiled confidently, and Jungkook sat relaxed on the couch beside Taehyung, his posture casual, his expression warm. To anyone watching, it looked like another flawless BTS interview. Until it was. The host leaned forward slightly, holding her cue card. "So, Taehyung," she said with a playful tone, "fans have been wondering for years, what kind of person do you imagine as your future bride?" Taehyung chuckled softly, rubbing the back of his neck. His eyes briefly wandered to the ceiling, as if searching for the right words. "Honestly," he said, "I think my future bride won't be Korean." The words landed gently, almost carelessly. But the silence that followed was anything but gentle. Jungkook froze. For a fraction of a second, no one reacted. The host blinked, unsure whether she had heard correctly. A few people in the audience let out awkward laughs, assuming it was a joke. But Jungkook didn't move. His smile faded, his jaw tightened, and his eyes darkened with something unreadable. One beat. Two. Three. The host tried to recover. "Oh, that's interesting," she said nervously. "So you're open to—" Jungkook stood up. No smile, no apology, no explanation. He just stood, adjusted the mic on his collar, and walked straight off the set. The studio fell into chaos. The host looked panicked, glancing between Taehyung and the camera. The crew whispered among themselves, unsure whether to cut to commercial. Taehyung remained seated, blinking slowly, the realization dawning too late in his eyes. It wasn't just an awkward answer. It was a knife. And Jungkook had felt the blade. No one dared follow him, not at first, not even Taehyung. The interview was live. Millions of people around the world watched in real time as the golden star of BTS turned his back and disappeared behind the curtain. Backstage, the hallway echoed with the sharp sound of Jungkook's boots against the marble floor. He didn't care about the cameras anymore. He didn't care about the staff calling his name. He didn't even care about the fact that his phone was already vibrating with messages. All that mattered was the echo of Taehyung's voice in his head. "My future bride won't be Korean. Not you. Not us. Someone else." He reached the dressing room, slammed the door shut, and locked it from the inside. The mirrors didn't lie. His reflection stared back at him, flushed cheeks, heaving breath, eyes wet with something too raw to name. For hours before the interview, he had rehearsed 100 answers, 1,000 smiles. They were supposed to tease each other, joke about old memories, hint at future projects. But not this. Not this betrayal wrapped in a sentence, so soft it felt cruel. Meanwhile, on the set, Taehyung sat motionless in front of a stunned crew. He knew. Of course he knew what that sentence meant. He hadn't meant to say it out loud. Not like that. Not on a live broadcast with Jungkook sitting right beside him. But the pressure had been building for months. The rumors, the questions, the weight of pretending nothing existed, something cracked inside him. He thought maybe if he said it, things would feel lighter. He was wrong. 3 hours later, Taehyung stood in front of the same dressing room door. It hadn't opened. No sounds from inside. He knocked once, no response. Again, still nothing. He pressed his forehead against the cold wood. "I didn't mean it that way," he whispered. Inside, Jungkook heard every word. He was sitting on the floor, his back against the wall, staring at his phone. On the screen was a photo from years ago. The two of them, arms thrown around each other after a concert, sweaty, exhausted, laughing like nothing in the world could ever touch them. Now everything had. The interview had been cut, the headlines exploded, fans flooded the internet. Is BTS breaking up? Did Taehyung betray Jungkook? Who is the mysterious non-Korean bride? But it wasn't about nationality. It wasn't even about a bride. It was about a promise. A silent one made in fleeting glances, in lingering touches off camera, in late nights sharing secrets no one else would ever understand. And that promise had just been broken in front of the entire world. The next morning, they didn't meet at the airport. Jungkook boarded alone. Taehyung arrived 10 minutes late, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses, too dark for the cloudy Seoul morning. Management said it was a schedule issue. The fans weren't so sure. As the plane lifted into the sky, Jungkook stared out the window, the city shrinking beneath him. He told himself he needed space. He told himself it didn't matter, but the truth was quieter and heavier. He wasn't running from the world. He was running from Taehyung. And Taehyung, standing alone in the terminal, watched the empty gate long after the flight had disappeared, realizing that a single sentence had cost him the one person he had never been ready to lose. The airport in Los Angeles was louder than Jungkook expected. Not because of the fans, not because of the flashing cameras, but because of the silence inside his head that refused to stay quiet. Every announcement echoed too sharply. Every footstep felt too close. He kept his hood low, sunglasses hiding his eyes, but nothing could hide the weight pressing against his chest. He told himself he came for work. A studio session, meetings, schedules packed tight enough to leave no room for thinking. But the truth followed him across the ocean. My future bride won't be Korean. The sentence replayed in his mind like a broken record, not angry anymore, just numb, the kind of numbness that feels heavier than pain. Back in Seoul, Taehyung hadn't slept. The hotel room was dark, curtains drawn, phone glowing endlessly in his hand. He had typed Jungkook's name more times than he could count, deleted messages, half-written apologies, voice notes he never sent. Every word felt wrong. Because how do you explain something you barely understand yourself? The internet was already on fire. Clips from the interview spread like wildfire. Slow-motion edits, zoomed-in reactions, fan theories stacked on top of each other, each one more dramatic than the last. Some said Jungkook was jealous. Some said it was scripted. Some said the two had been secretly fighting for years. Taehyung read everything and none of it. None of them knew the truth. Not the quiet kind. Not the kind that lived in hotel hallways at 2 a.m., in shared headphones on tour buses, in fingers brushing accidentally and never pulling away. The truth wasn't loud enough for headlines. But it was loud enough to break someone. In New York, Jungkook buried himself in the studio. Not recording songs, not really. He just needed sound, something to drown out the thoughts. The producer tried to talk to him. He nodded, smiled when expected, sang when asked. But his eyes stayed empty. Every lyric felt wrong. Every melody felt too honest. He kept checking his phone without realizing it. No new messages. Not from Taehyung. Not even from the group chat. It was like the world had decided to hold its breath. 3 days passed. Then 5. Then a week. Taehyung finally boarded a flight. Not for schedules, not for promotions. Just for him. He arrived in New York without telling anyone. No manager, no staff, just a hoodie, a cap, and a heart that refused to stay silent any longer. Outside Jungkook's studio building, Taehyung stood across the street, watching people enter and leave. Laughing interns, busy producers, artists he didn't recognize. But not him. He checked the time again. Then again. His phone buzzed, a message from Namjoon. "Are you with Jungkook?" Taehyung typed slowly. "No, but I'm trying." Inside, Jungkook was sitting alone in the recording booth, headphones resting around his neck. The track looped endlessly. Soft piano, no vocals, just empty space filled with sound. The door creaked open. He didn't look up. He already knew. "I know you're mad," Taehyung said quietly. Jungkook didn't answer. Taehyung stepped closer. "I didn't come to argue, I need you to hear me." Still nothing. The silence felt heavier than shouting. "I didn't mean that you weren't part of my future," Taehyung continued, his voice trembling. "I panicked. They asked me something I wasn't ready to answer, and I said the first thing that felt safe." Jungkook finally turned. His eyes weren't angry. They were tired. "You chose safety," he said calmly, "and I wasn't safe enough." Taehyung swallowed hard. "That's not what I meant." "But that's what you said." The words hung between them like glass. Taehyung took another step. "I've been scared for years. Of what people would think, of what the company would do, of what my family would say, but I was never scared of you." Jungkook let out a quiet laugh, not amused, just broken. "You told millions of people that your future doesn't look like me," he said softly. "Do you know what that feels like?" Taehyung's eyes filled. "It feels like regret. It feels like I ruined the only thing that mattered." Jungkook looked away. "For a long time," he whispered, "I thought we were protecting something, but now I realize maybe we were just hiding it until it disappeared." Taehyung shook his head. "It didn't disappear, I'm here." "You're late." The words hit harder than any scream. Taehyung stood there, helpless, realizing that showing up wasn't the same as being chosen. Outside, rain began to fall. Inside, two people stood facing each other with years of history and no clear way forward. Neither knew how to fix it. Neither knew if it could be fixed. But for the first time since the interview, they were finally in the same room again. And that alone felt like standing at the edge of something fragile. Not healing, not closure, just a chance to decide whether the silence would become permanent. The rain outside the studio turned the glass walls into blurred mirrors, streaked with silver lines that distorted the city lights. Inside, the air felt thick, heavy with words neither of them knew how to place correctly. Taehyung broke the silence first. "I stayed quiet for so long," he said, voice low, almost ashamed. "I thought if I didn't say anything, if I didn't confirm or deny, then nothing would change, that we could stay suspended." Jungkook leaned back against the mixing console, arms crossed, eyes fixed somewhere between the floor and the ceiling. "Suspended isn't living," he replied. "It's just waiting for gravity to win." Taehyung exhaled slowly. "I wasn't trying to erase you. I was trying to protect us." "From what?" "From everything," Taehyung answered honestly. "From fans, from rumors, from the company, from ourselves." Jungkook finally looked at him. "And who was protecting me?" Taehyung's throat tightened. "I thought you were strong enough." "That's the problem," Jungkook said quietly. "Everyone always thinks I am." The words weren't angry, they were exhausted. Taehyung stepped closer, careful, like approaching something that might break if touched too suddenly. "You didn't even give me a chance to explain. You walked out like I was already gone." "Because in that moment," Jungkook said, "I was." Taehyung felt something inside his chest collapse. "I never meant to make you feel replaceable." "But you did." The studio clock ticked softly in the background. Each second felt too loud. "For years," Jungkook continued, "I kept telling myself that what we had didn't need labels. That as long as you looked at me the same way, it didn't matter what the world thought. But when you said that sentence, it felt like I finally saw the version of your future that you're preparing for." Taehyung whispered, "It wasn't real." It was real enough to say out loud. Silence swallowed them again. Taehyung sank into the chair beside the piano, hands trembling slightly. "Do you know how many times I rehearsed what I'd say if someone asked me that question? 1,000. And every answer was a lie, because the truth felt too dangerous." Jungkook's voice softened. "So you chose a different lie." Yes, and I wasn't in it. Taehyung nodded slowly. Because I didn't know how to say your name without burning everything down. Jungkook closed his eyes for a moment. Maybe some things deserve to burn. The words lingered, raw and heavy. Taehyung looked up at him. Do you really think I want a future without you? Jungkook hesitated. I think, he said carefully, you want a future where you don't have to fight. Taehyung laughed bitterly. Being with you has always been the hardest and most beautiful thing I've ever done. Then why are you so afraid of it? Taehyung's voice broke. Because loving you isn't simple. It never was. It means risking everything I've built. It means choosing one truth and letting the others shatter. Jungkook stared at him. And what did you choose? Taehyung met his gaze, eyes red but steady. I chose fear. The confession felt heavier than any apology. Jungkook didn't respond immediately. He walked to the window, watching the rain slide down the glass like tears that refused to stop. For the first time, he said softly, I don't know where I stand with you. Taehyung stood up. Then tell me where you want me to stand. Jungkook turned. Their eyes met again. I want you to stand with me, he said. Not behind me, not hiding me, not keeping me as something you'll decide later. Taehyung swallowed. And if standing with you means losing everything else. Jungkook's voice was almost a whisper. Then at least I'll know I wasn't just a secret you were planning to outgrow. The words cut deep. Taehyung took a step forward, then another, until the space between them felt fragile, charged. I never planned to outgrow you, he said. I planned to survive long enough to deserve you. Jungkook looked at him, searching for something, truth, certainty, courage. All this time, Jungkook said slowly, I thought silence meant safety, but now it feels like silence was just another way of leaving. Taehyung shook his head. I'm not leaving. You already did once. Taehyung's eyes filled. Then let me come back properly. Jungkook exhaled shakily. I don't know if I can trust what you say anymore. Taehyung didn't deny it. I know. Another pause, not empty, just heavy. Outside, the rain finally began to soften. I don't need promises right now, Jungkook said. I just need honesty, even if it's ugly, even if it ruins everything. Taehyung nodded, then here it is. He took a breath. I said what I said because I was scared of admitting that my future already has a name, and that name is yours. Jungkook felt something tighten in his chest. But I was also scared that saying it out loud would make it real, Taehyung continued. And real things can be taken away. Jungkook looked down. They can also walk away. Taehyung reached out, stopped himself halfway. I don't want to lose you. Jungkook replied quietly. Then stop choosing futures that don't include me. The words weren't a demand. They were a boundary. Taehyung nodded slowly, understanding for the first time that love wasn't just something you felt. It was something you defended. The room fell silent again, but this time it felt different. Not empty. Not cold. Just uncertain. Two people standing at the edge of the same truth, finally seeing how deep it really was, and realizing that whatever happened next would change everything. They didn't leave the studio that night. Not because they had more to say, but because neither of them knew how to be the first to walk away again. The city outside slowly went quiet. The rain stopped. The glass walls dried, leaving faint streaks that caught the reflection of their silhouettes, standing in the same space but still unsure how close they were allowed to be. Taehyung finally sat on the floor, his back against the couch, staring at the ceiling like it might offer answers. Do you know what hurts the most? He asked softly. It's not that you're angry. It's that you look at me like you're already preparing for a life without me. Jungkook didn't respond immediately. He remained by the window, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense. I'm not preparing, he said at last. I'm protecting myself from expecting something you might never give. Taehyung closed his eyes. I never wanted to be the person who made you feel optional. But you were, Jungkook replied. In that moment, on that stage, I felt like I was standing next to someone who had already chosen a future where I didn't exist. Taehyung's voice dropped to almost a whisper. That wasn't my future, that was my fear talking. Jungkook turned toward him. Fear still speaks in your voice. The words weren't cruel, they were honest. Taehyung opened his eyes, meeting Jungkook's gaze from where he sat on the floor. I've spent my entire career learning how to smile while hiding everything that could destroy me. Somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be brave with the one person who never asked me to pretend. Jungkook's chest tightened. I never needed you to be perfect. I just needed you to be real with me. Taehyung laughed softly bitter. Real is dangerous. So is lying, Jungkook said. Silence settled between them again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It wasn't empty. It was full of things finally acknowledged. Taehyung slowly stood up. Do you know why I never talked about the future with you? He asked. Because every time I imagined it, it felt too fragile. Like if I described it out loud, something would come and break it. Jungkook's voice softened. And now? Now it's broken anyway. The honesty stung, but it was also freeing. Taehyung took a step closer, not touching, just close enough to feel Jungkook's presence again. When I said that sentence on air, part of me thought I was protecting us from attention, but another part of me was protecting myself from having to choose. Jungkook met his eyes. And now you have to. Taehyung nodded slowly. Yes. A long pause followed, not awkward, just heavy with meaning. Jungkook spoke first. I don't know if I can go back to how things were. Taehyung didn't argue. I don't want to go back, I want something honest, even if it's smaller, even if it's harder. Jungkook studied him. You say that now, but when the pressure comes back, when the cameras return, when the questions get louder, what happens then? Taehyung swallowed. Then I stop answering for everyone else and start answering for myself. Jungkook let out a slow breath. That's a lot to promise. I know, Taehyung said, but I'm not promising perfection, I'm promising presence. Jungkook's expression softened just slightly. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but something close to hope. Do you remember what you told me in Tokyo years ago? Taehyung continued. You said you didn't care if the world never understood us, as long as we understood each other. Jungkook nodded faintly. I remember. I think I forgot that, Taehyung admitted. I got so busy worrying about how we looked, I stopped thinking about how we felt. Jungkook looked down at the floor, and I kept pretending that waiting didn't hurt. Taehyung stepped closer again, his voice gentle now. It did, didn't it? Jungkook didn't deny it. It felt like loving someone through glass, always close, never allowed to touch. Taehyung's eyes filled. I'm tired of the glass. So was Jungkook. For the first time that night, he moved toward Taehyung instead of away. Not to embrace him, not to close the distance completely, just enough that the air between them felt warm again. I'm not ready to forgive you, Jungkook said quietly. Taehyung nodded. I don't expect you to. But I'm also not ready to lose you, Jungkook continued. Taehyung's breath caught. Then what are we? Jungkook thought for a moment. Two people who finally stopped lying to themselves. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. Outside, the city lights flickered back to life after the rain. Inside, two people stood in the quiet aftermath of a storm they had created together. No promises. No labels. Just the fragile understanding that whatever came next wouldn't be easy. But at least now, it wouldn't be built on silence. They left the studio together, but not side by side. Jungkook walked a few steps ahead, hands buried deep in his pockets, his thoughts louder than the traffic outside. Taehyung followed quietly, keeping just enough distance to respect the space Jungkook hadn't given back yet. The city felt different at night. New York lights reflected off wet pavement, neon signs blurring into streaks of color, people laughing on sidewalks completely unaware that two of the most recognizable faces in the world were walking through the crowd like strangers who shared too much history. They didn't speak until they reached the hotel. Inside the elevator, the silence returned, but this time it wasn't hostile. It was careful, like both of them were afraid that one wrong word could undo everything they had just rebuilt. When the doors opened on Jungkook's floor, Taehyung hesitated. "You don't have to come," Jungkook said without turning around. "I know," Taehyung replied softly, "but I want to." Jungkook nodded once and unlocked the door. The room was dim, only the city glow slipping through the curtains. Jungkook dropped his jacket on the chair, exhaling like someone who had been holding his breath for days. Taehyung stood near the doorway, unsure where he was allowed to exist now. "You can sit," Jungkook said, noticing. "You're not a guest." Taehyung swallowed and moved to the couch. Jungkook sat across from him, the space between them still deliberate. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Taehyung broke first. "Do you know what I was really afraid of?" he asked quietly. "Not the fans, not the company. I was afraid that if I chose you fully and someday you stopped choosing me, I wouldn't survive it." Jungkook looked at him. "So you chose to lose me slowly instead?" Taehyung winced. "I chose to control the pain instead of facing it." Jungkook leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "The problem is, pain doesn't stay small just because you try to manage it." Taehyung nodded. "I know that now." Another pause. This one felt heavier. "Do you regret it?" Jungkook asked. Taehyung didn't hesitate. "Every day since I said it." Jungkook closed his eyes for a moment. "I kept thinking maybe I imagined everything, that maybe I wanted something you never actually offered." Taehyung's voice cracked. "You were always what I offered. I just never said it in a language the world could hear." Jungkook opened his eyes again, meeting Taehyung's gaze. "And what about now?" Taehyung inhaled slowly. "Now I don't want to hide behind safety anymore. I don't want a future that doesn't scare me. I want one that's real, even if it's messy." Jungkook studied him, searching for the fear, the hesitation, the familiar escape. But Taehyung wasn't looking away this time. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," Taehyung continued. "I'm asking you not to disappear." Jungkook felt something loosen in his chest. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you," he said quietly. "I left because loving you started to hurt more than pretending I didn't need you." Taehyung stood up slowly and walked closer, stopping just short of touching him. "Then let it hurt together," he said. "At least it won't be lonely." Jungkook laughed softly, bitter and tired. "You make pain sound romantic." Taehyung smiled faintly. "Only because it means you're still here." Jungkook looked up at him. Really looked. No cameras, no stage lights, no rehearsed expressions. Just Taehyung, standing there with nothing left to hide. "I don't know what we are anymore," Jungkook admitted. "But I know I don't want a future where I never hear your voice again." Taehyung's eyes filled. "Then let's not define it yet. Let's just not walk away." Jungkook hesitated. Then slowly, carefully, he reached out and took Taehyung's hand. Not tightly. Not desperately. Just enough to feel that he was real. Taehyung's fingers trembled, but he didn't pull away. For the first time since the interview, the distance between them wasn't measured in fear. It was measured in breath. "I'm still angry," Jungkook whispered. "I know," Taehyung replied. "I still don't trust you completely." "I know. But I still choose you," Jungkook said. Taehyung's lips parted, but no words came out. He simply squeezed Jungkook's hand like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, two people sat in the quiet aftermath of everything they had almost lost. Not healed, not fixed, just choosing, for the first time, not to pretend that love was something that could wait forever. Morning arrived quietly, not with alarms or schedules, but with soft light slipping through the curtains and the distant hum of traffic far below. The city was already awake, but inside the hotel room, time felt suspended. Jungkook woke first. He didn't move right away. Taehyung was still asleep on the couch, one arm hanging off the side, hair messy, face relaxed in a way Jungkook hadn't seen in a long time. No cameras, no masks, just him. For a moment, Jungkook allowed himself to remember. Long flights where they shared headphones. Hotel rooms in foreign countries where sleep never came easily. Late-night talks about dreams that felt too big to say out loud. And then the memories shifted. The unspoken tension, the careful distance, the way everything important was always implied but never claimed. Jungkook stood up slowly, walked to the window and watched the city. He realized something that scared him more than the interview ever did. He wasn't afraid of losing Taehyung anymore. He was afraid of getting him back and still being hurt. Behind him, Taehyung stirred. "Are you running away again?" he asked sleepily. Jungkook turned. "No, just thinking." Taehyung sat up, rubbing his eyes. "That's usually more dangerous." Jungkook smiled faintly. "Yeah, it is." They sat in silence for a few minutes, the kind that didn't need to be filled. Then Taehyung spoke, his voice softer than usual. "Do you want me to leave?" The question wasn't defensive. It was careful. Jungkook considered it. "I want you to stay," he said. "I just don't know what staying means anymore." Taehyung nodded. "Me neither, but I think it means not pretending everything is okay." Jungkook looked at him. "So what do we do when it's not?" Taehyung thought for a moment. "We talk, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable." Jungkook let out a slow breath. "We've never been good at that." Taehyung smiled sadly. "We've been excellent at avoiding it." Another pause. "I have to go back to Seoul tomorrow," Jungkook said quietly. Taehyung's expression changed just slightly. "So soon?" Jungkook nodded. "Schedules, meetings. The world didn't pause just because we did." Taehyung looked down at his hands. "And after that?" Jungkook didn't answer right away. "That's what scares me," he admitted. "Not this moment, not this room, but what happens when we're back to being watched, managed, controlled." Taehyung stood up and walked closer. "Then we create something the world doesn't get to touch," he said. "Even if it's small, even if it's just honest conversations and stolen time." Jungkook met his eyes. "And if it's not enough?" Taehyung's voice was steady. "Then at least we'll know we didn't lose each other to fear." Jungkook laughed quietly. "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple," Taehyung replied. "It's just better than silence." Jungkook looked at him for a long time. "You know," he said, "when you said that line in the interview, part of me didn't just feel hurt. I felt erased." Taehyung's chest tightened. "I never meant to make you feel invisible." "But I did," Jungkook continued. "I spent years standing beside you, believing we were building something, and in one sentence I felt like I was never part of the picture at all." Taehyung's eyes filled again. "You were always the picture, I just framed it wrong." Jungkook looked away, fighting the familiar ache. "I don't want to be a secret forever." Taehyung stepped closer. "I don't want to live like I'm ashamed of loving you." The words were simple, but they landed hard. Jungkook felt his throat tighten. "Then prove it, not to the world, to me." Taehyung nodded. "I will, even if it takes time, even if I'm scared." Jungkook reached out, brushing his fingers against Taehyung's wrist. "I'm scared too," he admitted. "But I'm more scared of waking up one day and realizing I didn't fight for us." Taehyung smiled through tears. Then let's fight badly, awkwardly, honestly. Jungkook laughed softly. That sounds like us. They stood there, holding onto each other in the quiet morning light, knowing that nothing was fixed, nothing was guaranteed. But something had changed. Not the world, not their circumstances, just their choice. For the first time, they weren't waiting for the right moment. They were creating one, even if it was fragile, even if it might break again. At least this time, they would feel it together. The world never found out what really happened in that studio. There were no official statements, no press releases, no dramatic photos that could explain the tension behind their eyes in the weeks that followed. To the public, everything looked normal again. Smiles returned. Schedules continued. The machine kept moving. But for Jungkook and Taehyung, nothing was ever the same. They stopped pretending that silence was safety. They learned how to sit in uncomfortable conversations without running away, how to admit fear without disguising it as distance, how to choose each other not as an escape, but as a responsibility. Some days were still heavy. There were moments when old habits returned, when cameras made them careful again, when the future felt uncertain and fragile, like something that could collapse under the wrong question. But now, when things broke, they didn't break alone. They texted at 3 a.m. instead of disappearing. They argued without cutting ties. They said, "I'm scared," instead of "I'm fine." And slowly, quietly, something stronger replaced what they almost lost. Not a perfect love. Not a public one. Just an honest one. A love that didn't need headlines. A connection that didn't exist for fans, for rumors, or for validation. Only for two people who finally understood that waiting forever was just another way of letting go. Sometimes love isn't about grand confessions or dramatic endings. Sometimes it's about staying, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's risky, even when the world is watching. And in a life filled with noise, expectations, and endless attention, Jungkook and Taehyung chose the one thing they had avoided for years. They chose to be real. Not for the future, not for the audience, but for each other.